Yeah, my name is Larry Anderson. I'm an elder here. I usually am involved with the kids ministry, the Powerhouse ministry, and the teen ministry. So I'm going to envision you guys as kids, because that's where I'm comfortable at. But thank you for coming today. So let's get going with our message. One caveat, though, is I have been dealing with like a cough, so if I cough, forgive me. Our message today is Manna, how to get Egypt out of us. And it's a story that you probably are all familiar with, but we'll talk about it today. So first of all, how many of you, raise a hand, how many of you guys like camping? Campers. All right, yeah. Camping can be exciting and fun, and there's planning goes on, and maybe a little stress and stuff like that. And so some people like camping. Well, Sue and I, we've kind of progressed. We're not into camping, we're into glamping. So we don't like to lay on the ground, and we don't like to be in a tent. We don't like to be in the weather, and we don't like stinky bathrooms. So a few years ago, we bought a trailer, and we thought, all right, we got a trailer, this is awesome. We got our own bed, we got our own bathroom, and it doesn't smell. And so this is awesome. So we went camping a few times. One of the last times we went camping, we were camping, and we went to bed in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden, I hear at the headboard that's just like, and I'm going, oh, great, there's a mouse. And he's just like having happy days running on the headboard of our bed behind the bed. And there's no way to get to it because it's enclosed. And he's just going back and forth. And I'm a pretty light sleeper, so I can't sleep. So this went on for a long time. And I'm just like, oh, great. And then to add insult to injury, I look over at Sue, and she's like sound asleep. She doesn't hear a thing. And I'm going, what? Come on, you got to share my misery here. You got to get up and be awake with me. And but she didn't. And I had to tell her about the mouse and the headboard. And fairly soon after that, we sold the trailer. The mouse went out. So, but today we're going to go on probably the biggest camping adventure ever. Again, the story is built around Exodus. The story is about Egypt and the Israelites. And if you remember the story back in Exodus 14, 15, 16, the Israelites had ended up in Egypt because of a drought, and Joseph, one of Jacob's sons, he was second in charge to Pharaoh, and so he had a lot of influence, and so his family came and they were accepted, and they got through the famine and stuff, so everything was great. But our story kind of jumps up 200 years. So 200 years, Joseph's dead, Jacob and all his sons are dead, and all of a sudden, the Israelites are a pain in the Egypt's side. And all they see them is like they're just proliferating. They're getting so big that they're a threat to Egypt. So it's like, well, we got to do something about them. So they threw them into slavery. They had to start making bricks, and they just made it harder and harder and harder. And of course, the Israelite people started praying to God. And so God responds to that and answers the prayer and sends Moses. So after 10 plagues, Pharaoh finally lets them go. Again, Moses kept saying, let my people go. So finally, he lets them go. So from there, we'll start our little camping adventure. So this map shows where they went through the whole thing, but I'm not going to take you through the whole journey. I'm only going to start with Egypt and end up at the wilderness of sin. That's a great place to end up with. It's the wilderness of sin. So here we go. We're on this camping adventure. So the people are slaves. They have never had a vacation. They don't know what camping is, but they know that God rescued them out of Egypt, and Moses and Aaron are their leaders, so they take them on this adventure. So they hike their pants up and tuck it into their belts, so they got their shorts on, and they got their sandal tivas on, and they've got walking sticks, and they got a backpack with all their stuff that's they're taken out of Egypt. And everything in the Bible it's amazing, because everything has significance. Every little detail, every little story, all has meaning, and even the names, down to the names. So we're going to go through the different towns that they stop at. So the very first town they stop at is Sukkoth, and a kind of a loose translation of Sukkoth is tent town. And I'm going, all of a sudden in my head I'm going, oh, like a KOA. It's Tent Town. We're going to go to KOA at Tent Town. So they pull up to the KOA in Tent Town and see the proprietor, and he goes, well, how many campsites do you need? And they're looking at, about 1 million. And he's going, well, I don't know about that. So again, they end up staying there, and I'm guessing like the proprietor, like on the way out, telling Moses and Aaron, just make sure they're out of the pool. The pool closes at 10 o'clock. So get them out of the pool, 10 o'clock. So they're going, okay. So the next town they go to is Etham. And Etham translation means with them. And that's where God comes with the Israelites as a cloud in the morning and as a fire at the end of the day to protect them. And he's with them. And he's literally, physically with them, with the cloud and the fire. And he's protecting them. So it's really awesome. So the next part they stop at is on the Red Sea. And it's like, again, we're on camping, like Red Sea, we're going to go fishing, and we're going to go swimming, and they're just all excited and stuff like that. And there's 2 mountains. One on side is Pirahireth, and the other is Migdal. And it's like, I can go hiking and stuff like that, and everything's great. Until one day they see this cloud coming of dust, and it's Pharaoh. And he hasn't given up on getting them back. So he's coming, and he's going to take them back. And they're all mad at Moses and Aaron again. Why did you bring us out here? We're just going to die. Why did you do this? But again, God is watching over them. So God divides the Red Sea. They go through it. Pharaoh and his army try to go through. The water comes in, covers them up. So it's a great testimony for the Israelites of God saving them and providing for them. But it's also a great example for Egypt. Like, again, Pharaoh thought he was God. Well, he got proved fairly quickly that he is not God, that there's only one God, and that's Jehovah. So he gets both people get a lesson. And that's like a lot of things that happen in life is like, when we see things, when we see a blessing in our life, we get the blessing. But hopefully somebody that isn't a Christian or something sees that blessing. So not only is it an influence on us, it's an influence on them. That why is your life better than my life in the same circumstance? Again, we're reading a book about don't waste your sorrows, and it's kind of that whole theme that God puts sorrows and things in our life, and we can waste them by complaining about them, but they all have a purpose. And the purpose is for us to realize that God's there for us, but it's also for people that aren't Christians to see, well, why is your life different? Why did you react different? And it's because we have God in our life. So we move to the next town. And the next town is called Mara, and Mara translates to bitterness. So they're going to Mara, and they see these pools, and they're thirsty, and they're in the desert, so they're thirsty, and they run to the pools and think their thirst is going to be quenched, and find out the water is bitter. So again, they're complaining, and Moses and Aaron, why did you give us this bitter water? Why are we here? And so again, God provides an answer. He tells Moses to go, there's a tree, go break a branch off and throw the branch into the bitter water, and it turns sweet. Again, this is a great example of Jesus, that the type of the branch is the cross, and the cross and Jesus are what are going to take away bitterness in your life. I don't know if you've ever had bitterness in your life, but it doesn't make us feel good, and it's not going to get better. But if we have the cross and think about what Jesus did for us, that really helps get through that bitterness. So again, it's a great example. So the next town they go to is Elim, and Elim means mighty one. There was 12 springs there and 70 palm trees, and so they got a chance to rest and recover. And I think God gave them that rest and recovery because He knew what was coming up in the next part of their journey. So now they go to the wilderness of Sin, and that's where we're going to pick up with our reading. And there's kind of two lessons today. Again, first lesson is that God got them out of Egypt. And Egypt is a type in the Bible, and it represents the world. So, we're in the world, so God wants us to get out of the world. We're going to, He asks us to do that. But even though we might get out of the world, as we're going to read in the story, Egypt is still stuck in us. And He wants to get Egypt out of us eventually, because they're going to start complaining and things and remembering back to what happened in Egypt and how good they thought they had it. But again, we need to go through a process of getting Egypt out of us. So with that, we're going to pick up in Exodus chapter 16. Just read verses 1 through 3. So the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around the pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." So, have you guys ever been camping with unhappy campers? Not fun. They're literally 45 days into their camping, and they are mad. And I took my sons on a camping adventure one time, and it was, if anybody knows me, my wife knows me very, very well, I am not a planner. So we just hit the trail, and we went to the we're going to go to the Olympic Peninsula. So we just had my two sons, they were 8 and 2, and I had a little pickup with a canopy, and we were going camping. And so we take off from Spokane, head over the North Cascades Highway, which if you've ever been on it, is just beautiful, but very slow. So I get over to the Seattle side around Port Townsend. I'm going to go to Deception Pass because I go, wow, that's a great camping spot. Saturday. Guess what? The campground's full. So we go over there after like a 10-hour drive, and I'm going, okay, well, there's lots of other camping spots, so we'll just go and find a camping spot. So we're drive to Port Townsend, campground's full. Take the ferry from Port Townsend to Port Angeles, lots of campgrounds full. So I get to Port Angeles, and I'm going, all right, well, we'll just get a motel. And remember, because I'm planning, I don't think we've eaten. I don't think I might have fed them lunch, but I can't remember feeding them dinner. And so we get to Port Angeles, and I'm going to get a motel while there's a bowling tournament. So every stinking hotel, motel is booked. So we end up going up to this place called Hurricane Ridge, which is a really neat place. And I just pull off to the side of the road because this is like 16 hours into the trip with an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. And there's some unhappy campers, and I'm one of them. So, again, that's not a good place to be. And so the Israelites, who go back to our story, they're not happy, and they're not happy at Moses and Aaron because they're going, oh, don't you remember? I mean, we had food, we had everything we want to eat, and you brought us out here to die. You guys have just taken us where we don't want to be. So the thing about that grumbling and things is to remember that, again, Aaron and Moses, they're just like the camp leaders. They're like Stephen Johnson. He's a camp leader out at a kids camp. And so he's just the representative of God. So ultimately, really, who they're complaining about is God, that God's taking them somewhere where they're uncomfortable. And again, when we grumble against leaders and stuff, you got to remember that those leaders were put in place by God, so that you can be complaining against the leaders, but ultimately you're complaining against God. So Matthew Henry, I don't know if you know him, he's a great Bible commentator. He had 2 interesting comments about this portion of the Bible. He said, discontent magnifies what is past and vilifies what is present without regards to truth or reason. So he's saying, again, a perfect example in the story, the Israelites are magnifying the past. They're thinking about, oh, well, we had food and we had a place to live and everything was honky-dory, but they forgot that they're slaves and all the bad stuff that was happening, and they were the ones that asked God to help them. And then vilifying what is present, their miseries, they're out in the desert and they don't have food, and so they really elevate what's happening to them right now, and they totally disregard the truth and reason. And I know I'm guilty of this. Like you just into the circumstance at that very point in time. And then Matthew Henry, the answer to this is experiences of God's mercy greatly suppresses our distrust and murmuring. Again, the answer is remember back. Remember, how many times has God come to you and answered your prayers? How many times has God intervened? I always get down on the Israelites because it's like, you got God, you got a cloud in front of you, you got a fire at night, you got being delivered from Egypt, you've got being delivered from the Red Sea. It's been 45 days. How can you guys forget? You're already forgetting. So again, but I know in my own heart, in my mind, that I also forget. But it's always a blessing to remember back, remember what God has done for us, past, present, and again, the promises are for the future. So we'll pick up there on verse 4 to 12. So then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day they are to be prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, in the evening you will
know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us? Moses is kind of saying, hey, it's God that you're grumbling against. Moses also said, you will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumblings against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses told Aaron, say to the entire Israelite community, come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked towards the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. If I were God at this point, these guys would be in trouble. I would be looking to torch some portion of this Israelite grumblers, because I've had enough. But again, God is so merciful and so gracious that even in our grumblings, he hears us and he responds to us. So his response is to provide them manna. And he's going to give them manna from heaven, and it's going to be a blessing to them. He is always looking out for us, and he looked out for the Israelites at this point. And they're going to find out exactly what manna represents. So we'll pick that up in verse 13. That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is it? But they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needs. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. The Israelites did as they were told, which is awesome. Some gathered much, some little, and when they measured it, it was by the omer. He had gathered much, did not have too much. He who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered as he needed. Then Moses said to them, no one is to keep any of it until morning. However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until the morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Each morning, everyone gathered as much they needed, and when the sun got hot, it melted away. So back in that other portion we read about that God was going to test them. And the test was, here's what you do. Every morning you go out and get your manna. There's going to be just enough. Like if you have a big family, collect this much. If you have a little family, collect this much. And there's going to be just enough for you guys to survive on. But this is the test. You got to do what I say. So he tests them, and they fail the test. They decide they're going to try to cheat and go out and collect some more manna because they're greedy or whatever their motives were. And it turns to maggots and starts to smell. So again, God set up a test. He does that in our lives. He gives us things to do. And if we do them, we're blessed. If we don't do them, we're cursed, basically. You just listen to God or you don't. That's the choice. So we pick up there in 22. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person. And the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning." So they saved it until morning, as Moses had commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any on the ground tomorrow. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why the sixth day he is giving you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where he is on the seventh day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the seventh day. Again, God tested them. He gave them an answer for the fact that they were going to only have collected bread for 6 days, but they have to live for 7 days. So it's not like they weren't provided for on the seventh day. He just wanted to make sure, again, that the seventh day was a Sabbath day. That was the day that they were supposed to worship the Lord, appreciate what he'd done for them. And he provided for them on the sixth day, and so they didn't have to be hungry on the seventh day. And so God's always doing that. Again, he wants us here at church to remember him, to give him honor and glory, and that he provides us for us. And so he is just such a gracious God. So we'll pick up there on 31. So the people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take a omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so that they can see the bread I have given you to eat in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt." So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it. Then place it before the Lord to be kept for the generations to come." As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna in front of the testimony that it might be kept. The Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to the land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. So I don't know if it took 40 years for them to finally get Egypt out of them, to forget the meat pots and to forget the leeks and the onions, but God provided in that whole time. And he ended up, the whole storage of the manna in the jar, they ended up putting that jar in the Ark of the Covenant, just to remember, again, what God had done for them in the desert. So maybe you're asking, what does this story have to do with us today? What is manna? Why are you focused on manna? Well, again, I believe that manna is a type, and the type that it relates to is the bread of life, which we hear about in the New Testament. And I believe that Jesus is the bread of life. Well, I know he is because he said he was. So again, types matter. So we have manna today. Where's manna? In our Bible. We have the Word of God. We have the life of Jesus. And we need to go to it every day. It said that manna, the parallels again, the types between manna and Jesus. It said that the manna came out of heaven. Well, Jesus came out of heaven. Manna was a nourishment for them daily. Jesus nourishes us daily. The Word nourishes us daily. He gave manna just enough for every family. Whether it was a big family, little family, he gave manna. He gives us manna. As a family, we need to be sharing that manna with our families. The manna is fresh every morning. I don't know how many times you guys have read the Bible. I've read the Bible a few times, but it's always new. I mean, you can read it a bazillion times. I swear, I know. You can read the Bible a million times, and then you would always find fresh things. And the only time it ever goes stale is when we ignore it. Then we forget about it. Then we start living our lives like we're back in Egypt. And that is somewhere we don't want to be, but we have to consciously go to the Word as often as we can. Again, I'm not putting a guilt trip on everybody to go to the Bible every day. That's what I would recommend, and that's I think God would recommend. But again, to keep us nourished is really important. And we have to do that through God's Word. So, again, we talked about Jesus being that parallel. So, in John 6, there's lots of verses that say, Jesus is saying these words, that he is the bread of life. So, John 41, this is when Jesus said he was the bread of life, and the Jewish people are going, that again has more significance than just saying I'm the bread of life. They know he's referring to manna, and so they're saying you're really challenging what we believe in by saying what you are. And so it says, therefore the Jews were grumbling against him because he had said, I am the bread that comes down from heaven. So he's saying, again, remember back, manna came out of heaven, and they know the story. They know the story well. And so he's saying the bread that came out of heaven. So they knew what he was saying, that he was paralleling himself to manna. And then they respond, our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, that it is written, they gave them bread out of heaven to eat. And Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who is giving you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gave you the true bread out of heaven. So they again put a lot of emphasis on Moses and what he did. But Jesus is telling them it was God that provided that bread. So then he goes on to tell them that he is the bread of life. So it says, for the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Then they said to him, Lord, always give us this bread. And Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger. He who believes in me will never thirst. Again, Jesus is saying, I am that bread, and you need to come to me. And in 48 through 51, I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that comes down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. So, again, Jesus is that manna, and we have that today. So, again, the theme of this message was manna, how to get Egypt out of us. The only way we can get Egypt out of us is to be in the Word, to be studying the Word, to know what God has told us. Again, he tests, I think back of that story, it's a test. He's like, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do, and it's only going to be a blessing. If you do it, it's going to be a blessing. If you don't do it, it's going to be a curse. So this is a test. You read my Word, and you take my challenges, and it's going to bless your life. It's very simple. Also, the life of Jesus. We have we have this life of Jesus to model our lives after. It's perfect. He's perfect. He came out of heaven. He's claiming to be that bread of life. And he is the bread of life. And again, that we need to share it with our families. This is really key. Just don't store it up for ourselves. Just don't eat the manna ourselves. We should be sharing it with our families, our friends, our neighbors, wherever we can. It is such a blessing. I just thank you that we have the Word of God and the life of Jesus to nourish us every day. And so thank you very much. Thanks for being here today.
Amazing grace, how sweet